The rain hadn't started yet, but the sky threatened it. Olivia could feel the weight of it in the air, a thick silence settling over the small house she once thought she'd grow old in. Her baby, Eli, whimpered softly in her arms, unaware of the storm gathering in more ways than one. The walls, once full of laughter and warm Sunday meals, now echoed with tension. Every step Olivia took felt like walking on glass. Since Daniel's funeral 3 weeks ago, nothing had been the same. The house was colder, not just from the absence of heating, but from the presence of silence. And in that silence, Margaret's eyes followed her like shadows, disapproving, accusing. Olivia had tried. Every morning, she'd make breakfast before. Margaret came downstairs hoping to offer a piece she didn't know how to ask for. But Margaret never ate. She never spoke kindly, only stared with that unspoken question that hung in the air like fog. Why are you still here? It wasn't just grief. Olivia could have understood grief. She was drowning in her own. But what lived in Margaret's heart now wasn't just pain. It was blame. And Olivia didn't know why. That morning, the tension finally cracked. Margaret stood at the kitchen doorway, arms folded, eyes cold. "I think it's time you left," she said. Olivia froze, spoon halfway to her mouth as she tried to feed Eli some mashed banana. "Left?" she echoed, unsure she'd heard correctly. "You've been here long enough," Margaret said flatly. "Daniel is gone. There's no need for you to stay in this house anymore." "This is Eli's home," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. Margaret's voice rose just slightly, not shouting, but firm like a verdict. "This was my son's home. And now it's mine. You don't belong here." It wasn't anger that hit Olivia in the chest. It was disbelief. She had nowhere else to go. After Daniel's death, she'd left her job to care for Eli full-time. Their savings were minimal. Daniel had been the main provider, and the life insurance policy was still tangled in paperwork. Olivia hadn't even begun to process how she would survive financially. All she had left was this house, this roof, this illusion of family. "You know I have nowhere else," she said quietly. Margaret's lips thinned. "Then you should have thought about that before." Before what? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Margaret turned away and began walking back down the hallway. But then she paused. "You always brought chaos into Daniel's life. Maybe now we'll have peace." The word stung more than if she had screamed. Olivia's hands trembled as she held Eli tighter. The baby, sensing his mother's tension, began to cry softly. By sunset, it was done. Margaret had packed a small bag for her, just a few clothes and diapers, and left it by the front door. Olivia begged with her eyes, but the door was already being opened. Outside, the wind had picked up. Dark clouds had gathered over the street like a warning. Still, Margaret stepped aside, hand pointing outward. "You can't stay," she said, simply. Olivia stood frozen, Eli in her arms, the weight of reality crashing over her. "Where will I go?" she asked one last time. Margaret didn't answer. She only turned away and shut the door behind her. As Olivia stepped outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. She looked down at her baby, his tiny face curling in confusion. No jacket, no umbrella, just a small bag, a broken heart, and a baby who deserved so much more than this. The street stretched out in front of her like a stranger. Olivia walked, slowly, her shoes quickly soaking through, each step heavier than the last. Behind her, the door remained closed. No one called her back. No second thoughts. Just the sound of rain falling harder with each minute, as if the sky itself was mourning. But what Olivia didn't know, what the rain couldn't wash away, was that this was not the end. It was the beginning. The rain fell steadily now, soaking Olivia and Eli to the bone as they walked slowly down the empty street. The cold prickled through her thin jacket, but the chill in her heart was far worse. Every step felt heavier, not just from the damp clothes or the weight of the baby in her arms, but from the crushing reality that she was utterly alone. The woman who was supposed to be family had sent her away in the storm, as if she were nothing more than a stranger. Olivia's mind raced, searching for a plan, a place to go. But there was nothing, no close friends nearby. Her parents lived hours away and hadn't spoken to her since the argument before Daniel's accident. A bitter silence had grown between them. Too much pain, too many misunderstandings. She felt like she had slipped through every crack life had to offer, left stranded and invisible. Eli fussed and Olivia rocked him gently, trying to soothe the tiny life in her arms. His soft cries were like a thread pulling her back from the edge of despair. He depended on her. This much was clear. Somehow she had to keep going, even if every instinct screamed for her to fall down and let the world swallow her whole. In the distance, the faint glow of a street lamp flickered through the rain, casting a dim pool of light onto the wet pavement. Olivia headed toward it, hoping to find some shelter, some warmth, even if just for a moment. As she passed a small park, she saw the outline of an old bench beneath a tree with thick branches. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Carefully, she settled down, pressing Eli close and covering him as best she could with her damp jacket. The night wrapped around them like a cold blanket, but Olivia's mind refused to quiet. Questions and memories collided inside her. How had it come to this? Just weeks ago, they had been a family, laughing over baby Eli's first smile, making plans for the future. Daniel had promised to come back, to hold her hand through the dark days, and now he was gone, leaving her to face a world that suddenly felt cruel and vast. She thought about the moments before the door slammed behind her, the look in Margaret's eyes, so cold, so final. How could someone who once loved Daniel turn so quickly to hatred? Had Olivia really been the problem all along? Those words haunted her, cutting deeper than any wound. The rain soaked through her clothes, chilling her to the bone. But still, she held on. Eli needed her, and somewhere inside her a tiny flame of hope flickered. Maybe she didn't have a home tonight, but she had this. Her son. Her reason to fight. As the hours passed, the storm eased, and the sky began to clear. The first light of dawn painted soft pink streaks across the horizon. Olivia looked down at Eli's sleeping face and whispered, "We're going to be okay, I promise." With renewed determination, she stood and began to walk toward the city, knowing she needed help. Somewhere out there was kindness waiting. She just had to find it. Every step was uncertain, but with Eli by her side, she believed in the possibility of a new beginning. What happened next would change her life forever. The city was waking up as Olivia pushed forward, her footsteps echoing softly on the wet sidewalks. The early morning light filtered through the buildings, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward her like silent witnesses to her journey. Her arms ached from holding Eli so tightly, but she couldn't let him feel her exhaustion. So, tiny breaths, warm and steady against her chest, gave her a fragile strength she didn't know she had. She passed by the closed shops and empty cafes, their windows fogged with the cool morning air. People hadn't yet filled the streets, and Olivia felt invisible, a ghost drifting through a city that seemed too busy to notice a mother and child lost between its cracks. But then, through the haze of despair, a small sign caught her eye. A community center offering shelter and help. Her heart beat faster, a spark of hope lighting within her. She hurried toward the building, clutching Eli close, praying it would be a safe place. The door creaked open before she could knock, and a kind-faced woman stepped out, her eyes wide with concern at the sight of Olivia and her drenched baby. "Come inside, dear," the woman said softly, guiding her through the warmth of the center's lobby. The heat was a relief, thawing the cold that had seeped into Olivia's bones. Volunteers bustled about, offering blankets, food, and quiet words of encouragement. For the first time in days, Olivia felt the tight grip of loneliness loosen just a little. She was given a small cot in a quiet corner, and as Eli nursed peacefully, Olivia allowed herself a moment to breathe. The woman, who introduced herself, as Sarah sat beside her and listened as Olivia shared the story of the night before. The rejection, the rain, the endless uncertainty. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You are stronger than you know," she said, "and you're not alone anymore." Over the following days, Olivia began to rebuild what had been shattered. The community center became a refuge, a place where kindness outweighed judgment. Volunteers helped her apply for assistance, find baby supplies, and even connect with a counselor who understood grief and loss. With each small step, the weight on her shoulders lightened. But it wasn't just the practical help that mattered. It was the human connection. Strangers smiled at Eli, cooing over his bright eyes. Other mothers shared their stories of struggle and hope, reminding Olivia that she wasn't the only one fighting to survive against the odds. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the windows, Olivia caught herself smiling, a quiet, genuine smile that had been missing for too long. She realized that despite everything, she had found a new kind of family here. It wasn't the one she'd lost, but it was real, filled with compassion and understanding. And yet, deep inside, a part of her still wondered what the future held. Could she truly rebuild? Could she create a home from the ashes of her past? With Eli's tiny hand wrapped around her finger, she made a silent vow. No matter what, she would keep moving forward. For him, for herself. This was more than survival. It was a chance to rediscover hope in the darkest of times, and to prove that sometimes, the most beautiful stories begin with a single, painful step into the unknown. The days turned into weeks, and Olivia's life began to find a new rhythm, one built on small victories and the kindness of strangers. The shelter had become more than just a temporary refuge. It was a community where she felt seen and supported. Yet beneath the surface of this fragile hope, a restlessness stirred inside her. She longed for independence, for a place to call her own, where Eli could grow up safe and loved. One chilly morning, as she cradled Eli near the window, Olivia decided it was time to take a step that terrified her. She would look for a job. It wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming her sense of purpose and proving to herself that she could provide for her son. The thought of balancing motherhood with work, especially without Daniel, made her heart pound with both fear and determination. With Sarah's encouragement, Olivia dusted off her old resume and began visiting local businesses. She had worked as a receptionist before, but the gap in her employment and the circumstances of her recent past made each application feel like an uphill battle. Doors closed gently but firmly, and whispers followed her out the door more than once. One afternoon, exhausted and disheartened, Olivia sat on a park bench with Eli nestled in her lap. The sky was a pale gray, hinting at rain again, but this time she didn't feel the familiar dread. Instead, she thought about the strength it had taken to come this far. The nights spent rocking her son when he couldn't sleep. The days of waiting in lines, the kindness of strangers who had helped her carry this burden. Her phone buzzed softly. It was a message from an unknown number. "Hi, Olivia, this is James from Greenfield Library. We received your application and would love to meet you for an interview." Her breath caught. The library was a quiet place filled with books and stories, a place she loved as a child. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the fresh start she needed. The interview was scheduled for the next day. Olivia prepared carefully, choosing her most professional clothes and rehearsing answers to questions that made her stomach flutter. When she arrived, James greeted her with a warm smile, and for the first time in weeks, Olivia felt like she belonged. The interview went well, and by the end of the week she received a call that lifted her spirit. The job was hers. As she walked out of the library on her first day, Eli's giggles echoing in her memory, Olivia felt a new kind of hope take root. This job wasn't just about paying bills, it was a step toward rebuilding her life on her own terms. But the past still lingered like a shadow. Margaret's rejection had left wounds that wouldn't heal overnight. Olivia knew that forgiving wasn't just for Margaret, it was for herself too. Holding Eli close, she whispered a promise to let go of the bitterness, to embrace the future even if it was uncertain. One evening, after a long day at work, Olivia found herself sitting alone in the park, watching the city lights flicker on. Eli was asleep in her arms, and she felt a quiet strength settle inside her chest. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was no longer walking it alone. She had lost much, but she had also gained something precious, a resilience that would carry her through storms yet to come, and a love that would never be broken. And in that moment, beneath the vast night sky, Olivia realized that sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations. The air was crisp with the first hints of autumn, leaves beginning to paint the sidewalks in shades of gold and rust. Olivia adjusted Eli's tiny knit hat as they strolled through the neighborhood, his fingers reaching out with fascination at every falling leaf. It had been nearly 2 months since she had started her job at the library, and although the days were long and sometimes unpredictable, they were filled with a quiet kind of joy. She had found her rhythm again, waking early to feed Eli, dropping him off at the childcare center run by the shelter, greeting regular visitors at the front desk of the library, shelving books, recommending stories. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Every paycheck brought her closer to the goal she had quietly written in the back of her journal: find a home. Not just a place to stay, but a place to grow. A place where Eli could have his own crib, where she could cook meals without whispering, to avoid waking sleeping strangers in the next cot over. Her coworkers had grown fond of her quickly. James, her manager, often remarked how the library felt warmer with her there, and even the grumpiest of patrons seemed to soften when Olivia spoke. It wasn't just the way she treated people, it was the light in her eyes, the way she carried herself as if every gesture came from a deep well of gratitude and quiet strength. One afternoon, as she helped an elderly woman find her favorite novel, the woman gently touched Olivia's hand and said, "You remind me of someone who's been through the storm and come out stronger. Don't ever forget that." That night, while watching Eli sleep beside her at the shelter, Olivia thought deeply about those words. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was healing. And with every healed piece, she was becoming someone new. Not just a widow, not just a mother abandoned by her in-laws, but a woman who chose to rise instead of crumble. And then something happened that she didn't expect. It was a Thursday afternoon when a soft knock interrupted her organizing a shelf of children's books. She turned and found a familiar figure standing in the doorway: Margaret. Her mother-in-law, dressed in a coat that matched the turning season, looked thinner, older, and far less certain than Olivia remembered. They stared at each other in stunned silence. Neither spoke for a long time until Margaret finally said, "I didn't come here to fight, I came to apologize." The words were so out of place, so unimaginable, that Olivia felt her knees weaken. "I was angry," Margaret continued, her voice tight with emotion. "Angry at the world, at fate, and at you. I lost my son and couldn't make sense of anything. But I was wrong. I see that now. I see how strong you are. What a beautiful job you're doing raising my grandson." Eli babbled in his stroller, waving a toy book in Margaret's direction. Something in her expression cracked and tears spilled from her eyes. Olivia didn't respond immediately. Her heart was a swirl of emotions: pain, confusion, relief, and caution. But mostly she felt a weight begin to lift. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive everything," Olivia said softly, "but I'm willing to listen. For Eli's sake, and maybe for ours too." Margaret nodded, her hands trembling. "That's all I ask." As they sat in the quiet of the library, surrounded by stories of transformation and redemption, Olivia realized she was living one of her own. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like the girl who had been chased into the rain. She felt like a woman rewriting her story, one page at a time. The winter sun filtered gently through the frosted windows, casting a golden hue across the small apartment Olivia now called home. It wasn't grand: 2 modest rooms, worn wooden floors, and a kitchen just big enough for one person to cook comfortably. But to her, it was everything. A space of her own, a place where Eli had his crib tucked beside her bed and books lined the shelves like old friends. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air as she prepared breakfast, Eli babbling cheerfully from his high chair, smashing banana bits into the tray. It had been almost 4 months since she left the shelter. With help from the community center and a careful savings plan, Olivia had found this small but warm corner of the city to begin again. Each object in the apartment told a story. The second-hand rocking chair she found at a thrift store, the patchwork quilt from Sarah at the shelter, and a framed photo of her and Eli that James from the library had taken on her last birthday. It wasn't just a home, it was a testament to everything she'd survived. Margaret had become a quiet presence in their lives. The road between them was still bumpy, full of cautious steps and emotional landmines, but it was a road nonetheless. She visited once a week now, often bringing fresh vegetables or small toys for Eli. Sometimes they would sit on the couch and talk about Daniel, about the past, about the things left unsaid. Olivia had learned that forgiveness wasn't a sudden moment, but a choice made day by day, and though the pain hadn't completely disappeared, it no longer ruled her heart. At the library, Olivia had been offered more responsibility, running weekend story sessions for children and helping with community literacy programs. She found herself blossoming in the role, using her own story to inspire others who came in carrying invisible burdens. She met people who had lost everything and still chose to hope. People who reminded her of herself. One rainy afternoon, much like the one that had once changed her life forever, Olivia stood at the library window watching the storm roll in. Eli was napping in the staff room, his tiny chest rising and falling beneath a soft blanket. The sound of the rain no longer brought fear. It had become a kind of music, a rhythm that told her even storms pass. As she watched the droplets race down the glass, a young woman came into the library, soaked and cradling a small child. She looked lost, frightened, just as Olivia had once looked. Without hesitation, Olivia walked over, a gentle smile on her face, and offered her a warm towel, a hot cup of tea, and the quiet assurance that things could get better. Later that evening, as she rocked Eli to sleep in the chair by the window, Olivia thought about how far she had come. There had been moments she'd wanted to give up, moments when the darkness had seemed too heavy. But through it all, she had kept going. For Eli, for herself, for the version of her future she refused to give up on. She pressed a kiss to Eli's forehead, whispering, "We made it, baby. We really made it." Outside, the rain began to ease, the clouds parting just enough to let the evening light shine through. And somewhere deep within her, Olivia knew her story wasn't just one of pain, it was one of rising, of finding light in the unlikeliest places. And though her journey had begun with heartbreak, it had led her to something beautiful, something whole. Not all beginnings are chosen. Not all storms are kind. But every story has the power to change when we choose to keep walking even with trembling steps.